Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and welcome to what was previously thought to be the impossible. Indeed, I am joined by the absolute legend himself, Todd Howard, for a very special interview. Sir, how are you today? Thank you for joining me.
Salutations. I am so
Yeah.
excited to be here. You'd be surprised like how many of your videos I watch. I know we've met before,
Yes.
and I've talked about that back in the day. You're kind of one of the originals for us and followed your career
Yeah.
and what you've done. And, thanks for everything that you've done for
Oh,
our games and talking about them to our fans. And, everybody here loves the channel.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot because I know sometimes I come in hot, I love hard, and then when things go south, sometimes criticism's harsh. So I appreciate that. Thank you again for being here. And to really kick us off, obviously I got a million questions for you, man, but I want to know how you're doing, Todd. I want to know how you're doing. Like, I feel like the people are a little concerned. You're spread thin, right? That's the thought process. The Fallout TV show, Starfield support, Elder Scrolls 6, doing a little Indiana Jones. I just want to know how you're feeling to kick things off before we get into the
I
tough
mean,
stuff. Like, what's
that's a
the,
very nice question. I
yeah,
appreciate that. I'm
yeah.
doing great. And look, I think the main thing for everybody to remember is, you know, it's I have a whole studio of amazing people that I get to work with. By no means
Mhm.
is it just me, and so many people I've worked with over really decades, and a lot of new people. Studio's about 450 people right now, but folks like Ashley Chang, who's the managing director here, and Angela Browder, who's the production director, runs a studio here in Rockville, and so a lot of us have worked together for a while. And yes, I do get to do a lot of stuff, but it's all great. And I do have some things that I've gotten better at in, I would say, delegating, as well as how to use my days and sort of
Sure.
which hours I block off for meetings, and everything. But you look at what we're doing, I just, love it all. This is like my
Yeah, it's a good
life.
time.
It's not just, I don't have any hobbies. I like video games. I love our games. I love our fans. So it's kind of nonstop.
On that note, then, what have you been playing lately? Have you been, what's been inspiring you lately? You're always creating,
Hmm.
and I feel like you guys have been doing so much, as you mentioned. It's really like a high point. I kind of marked that 2003 to 2008 stretch. You guys just had so many games coming out between Morrowind, Fallout 3. It feels like kind of that stretch again. There's just so much happening with
Mm.
BGS where I remember there was a time you guys would just fall silent. So with you making so much, for me at least, the creative inspiration comes from a lot of games. So have you been playing anything that's been kind of lighting your fire and making you excited to come into the studio and get to work?
I mean, it sounds weird, but like we are putting out a lot of stuff. We have a lot of stuff that we're doing. So right now, I'm enjoying playing Shattered Space. I'm obviously playing Indiana Jones. So, you know, I do play a lot of our own stuff. Whenever we're updating Starfield, I'm jumping in there as well just to
Nice.
play through those updates. Outside of ours, let's see. I do jump a lot lately between Diablo 4, depending on my mood.
Mm,
Forza, I love Forza. Been
nice.
playing some Red Dead 2 again lately.
Okay.
Cyberpunk, I think, is great. I could not be more excited for the EA Sports college
I
football game.
know. I thought of you right away.
I tell you what, and I know Andrew Wilson, so they dropped that trailer, and I emailed him, and I literally I got like welled up, and it's a weird thing. Like this is going to be like completely ridiculous for coming from me. Like they haven't made a sequel to that game for like 11 years, 12 years,
Yeah.
was it 2014?
I think 14 was the last one. Yeah.
And like I missed the hell out of that game. Like, I'm never gonna play college football and that was my avenue for, like, experiencing that world,
Right.
and I love college football, and then it went away, and kinda like that period of my life in the summer, I miss it so much, and I think that is the greatest trailer for a sports game I've ever seen. I can't wait.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. I dropped so many sports games at this point. So I'm just like, it looks like something new and refreshing. So I'll be there right with you. All right. We got a good feel of how you're doing, what you're playing. Let's get into some fun stuff beyond that, right? When we started to work on getting this interview together, you know where my head went right away. I gotta talk to Todd about Fallout. I gotta see what's going on here. More I'm focused on the future of Fallout. There's a lot going on with 76, but really what I'm looking at here is we're at this point now where Fallout's at its most popular. At least that's seemingly where it's at with the TV show combined with the 76 strong resurgence. Fallout 4 continues to do well. Like it's just continuing to grow and grow in popularity. Let's talk a little bit about New Vegas too. Like what would you say is the holdup for such a potential, for many fans, obvious, very exciting success and project here? Like it seemed like when I listened to your interview with Kind of Funny, there are some things in motion with Fallout. I doubt you can specify here today, but it seems like for a lot of fans, the frustration is like, well, why were we waiting in the first place? Like it was already pretty big and established and successful. Was it like seeking partners? Like what's going on with the potential New Vegas 2? Like what's the feel with moving forward with Fallout?
Well, look, first, I agree with the statement that Fallout's never been more popular.
Okay.
And looking at the number of players coming to those games, obviously the popularity of the TV show. So when, we give a lot of thought to kind of franchise management. I spend a lot of time thinking about franchises I love, what I've seen out there in terms of content. And so for us, it's sort of game planning out. Number one, making sure Fallout is relevant in the
Mm,
world. And
mhm.
I think, well, clearly it is. And
Check.
people are hungry for even more. We've never stopped doing, Fallout work. A lot of that work goes on, obviously, in Fallout 76. We have the Skyline Valley update out today.
Yeah.
And so really, really excited with where that game is at. Feel really fortunate and the team so proud of the work that's been done there. And then for other Fallout games in the future, obviously I can't talk about those right now,
Mhm.
but I would say sort of rushing through them, or we need to get stuff out that is different than the work we're doing in 76. We don't feel like we need to rush any of that.
Got it.
Right now, the Fallout TV show fills a certain niche in
Mhm.
terms of the franchise and storytelling. Totally get the desire for a new kind of mainline single player game.
Mhm.
And look, those things take time. I don't think it's bad for people to miss things
Right. Right.
as well. So we just want to get it right and make sure that everything we're doing in a franchise, whether it's Elder Scrolls or Fallout or now Starfield, that those become, meaningful moments for everybody who love these franchises as much as we do.
Got it. So it's kind of a bit of waiting for the right opportunity for you guys and less about meeting a cadence per se, like we have to have a Fallout game done in X amount of years.
Um, More or less.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would
Okay.
say, look, obviously I can't talk about the stuff that we're working on in this moment.
Sure.
And so my desires are always like I'd like to hold the stuff back as long as possible.
Yeah.
And, my perfect scenario for games are to announce them and get them out as quickly as possible. So I know it's probably not the answer everybody wants. They want to know everything that's happening.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't think you're gonna come on here and like announce a brand new Fallout
right.
game as great as that would be. I totally get it, and I support your mindset of as short of a window between announcement and reveal because I think it's really important. Like when you guys, I think started that trend with Fallout 4. I think it was so paramount to where the industry was going. We were trending more and more in this direction of like, oh, it's a year, it's 2 years before we actually get the thing that we saw all that time ago, and it's changed dramatically. That's how game development works. So I love that you guys when we actually see it. Um, in Starfield's case, I think it just gradually looked better, which was really cool. But when we see it, we know that like that's what we're gonna get. So I support your idea of like, I know you got all those secrets in the tuck, but maybe not speaking too soon on it. So with that in mind, right now the standing, if you will, lone Fallout game, which just as you mentioned had Skyline Valley come out, is Fallout 76. And I had a question for starters, and just how long you think that game would be supported for, because I'll be the first to call myself out and say there were many times I thought, looking at the roadmap, I'm like, it looks like it's kind of teetering on the edge. Like, are they going to keep going? Now it's at this point with Atlantic City, Skyline Valley. You guys are bringing ghouls into the game. I'm like, dang, like it's on a whole other level. It's really won me over even, and I was very skeptical about it. So I
Hmm.
want to know like what's the plan for support moving forward with 76? Because it feels like you guys are adding in ways that like the ghoul thing for me was like a dream because I remember reading about like old Fallout MMOs and the idea was to have different playable races and is there a plan to expand that? Like, how far do you guys want to keep going with 76?
We're going to keep going. Look, that game has never been more popular than it is right now as
Mhm.
we're talking. And so we have a great kind of internal roadmap of things that we're doing for the next several years for that game. We think it's going to keep continuing and keep continuing. You think one of the things that you see, in the industry overall is people play their games for longer.
Yeah.
This study at the end of last year, like the top 10 played games for 2023, the average age of those games was 6 years old.
Wow.
Fallout 76 is now 6 years old. The only new game I think in that list was Starfield, and the only single player game, new
Woo.
IP, excuse me. Um, and so we found this too with Skyrim turning 13 years old, that people really do play these games for a long time. And so for 76, we think it's going to continue and continue.
Do you have any ideas, any teases, anything you can kind of throw out there for long term? Like, I really love the idea of expeditions. In some senses, it didn't go how I anticipated. I really like what America's Playground did. I'm like, okay, cool, new open playable zones. Is there a plan to do maybe like more of those moving forward? Is that a piece of support you're thinking about doing for 76?
I think the expeditions are good. They're okay.
Mhm.
The map expansion, we feel is a much better. We're dropping these big free content updates. I think that's a much more meaningful one.
Mhm.
We're going to see how Skyline Valley does. There's another part to it that then is coming as well.
Ooh.
Um, and so I don't want to spoil everything. I think that type of thing where people can play on the map I'm going through the list of features now. Well, I would say this: we teased the ghoul pretty early.
Mhm.
That's pretty early for us to tease a
Yeah.
feature that's coming, early-ish next year to Fallout 76. And that's a really good one that changes how your character plays. So I think the good thing about a game like that, if you look at the last 6 years of updates we've done, I think there's close to 50 updates to the game. You
Mhm.
see kind of, how things changed and evolved over that time period. And we feel we're able to keep that up.
Got it. One thing I've always wondered about with 76, because at times I wondered if it was kind of caught in this rock and a hard place situation where and then again, this is my own interpretation, was like, oh, I want to see content get to the next level. But you guys give it out for free, which I think has been wise, right? Because at one point it was kind of like clawing back and getting that comeback story. Now I think it's just at the most accepted it's been. People are like, this is great, this is awesome. Have you guys ever considered, this is gonna come across like I'm advocating for it. I love free stuff, but have you considered like, oh, we could push the needle with this piece of content and do a little bit more, but we'd have to charge for it? Or is like the idea moving forward, 76, like let's continue to keep this just free updates often? Because I know you guys already have like the battle pass and the atomic shop and so on. So have you ever thought about charging for like actual added on, quests or locations that maybe let you get a little more ambitious because you get a little back?
The good news is that the other things you talked about, like the atomic shop, Fallout First, the seasons and
Hmm.
rank ups and all of these things that are there. And I know like that kind of, you see it in games. Sometimes that those types of monetization, they get a negative reaction. But the one thing they do allow us to do is do these big expansions and give them to everybody for free. And so I think there's a debate there and like, what is the right approach? I will say that approach is working awesome for 76. And we got a really, really healthy community around the game. And that when we're able to drop like a Skyline Valley, because it is an online game, you
Hmm.
want the community, everybody is experiencing that
Sure.
together. So I just want to say, like, here, like, shout out to the Fallout 76 community.
Yeah.
That game obviously had a rough launch, and our community really stuck with it. And given the nature of the game, where we started, which is, hey, the players in this world are going to make it their own.
Mhm.
Can't say enough about them as new players come into the game. It's the most friendly apocalypse that
So
there could
true.
be,
Yeah.
and the, we're hearing from like our elder players, people who played the game for years, how excited they were when the show came out and all these new players came in because it changed the game for them as
Yeah.
well. So really, really special.
Yeah, no, it really is an awesome community. It's not even just like a talking piece. They're
Yeah, yeah.
so sweet. They're so nice, and feels like online nowadays it's becoming exceedingly rare. So it's super appreciated what the 76 community does. Last 76, really, a question I had for you. Again, this is my own interpretation. Was when 76 was introduced as this sort of live service product, for me, I thought a little bit of Elder Scrolls Online, like, okay, this will be So I think this is supported for a while, and we might not see a new actual Fallout entry for some time as like Bethesda goes to work on other stuff. Is there ever a fear or a trepidation from Bethesda Game Studios that these like a Fallout game from a mainline entry can't stand side by side with 76? And I guess that kind of ties into Elder Scrolls as well, because you've gotten these spin-offs, for example, since ESO, but we haven't seen like a mainline entry since then. Is there this kind of concern of like, can we have two Fallout games existing at once or two Elder Scrolls games existing at once? Or do you want to just, I mean, was this part of the plan? Like, let 76 cook, get its legs, and get to a point now where it's doing the best it has ever been.
Look, that's a really good question. And when you're sort of starting those things, we have that fear as well. Is one game going to cannibalize another? I think
Mhm.
the good news is, as long as like the initial releases are spread out a little bit, they don't. They both
Mhm.
find their audiences, right? Like Skyrim is still one of our most played games, while Elder Scrolls Online is celebrating their 10th anniversary and doing really well. We've noticed
Yeah.
even when we update those games, they don't really cannibalize each other. And then you see it with Fallout 4 kind of hitting number one on the charts, and then
Sure.
76 right behind it. And so, I mean, logic would say there's a little bit of cannibalization between the two, but
Mhm.
much, much less in practice than we thought between these games. So, you know, when there's another Fallout, we'll call it classically single player game.
Mhm.
Um, my expectation is 76 is just as healthy as it is today.
Awesome. That's really good to hear. With that in mind, I had a question about kind of the future of Bethesda Game Studios titles. Starfield, you've said, has years of updates on the way. You know, Skyrim still gets updated. Fallout 4 just got a next gen SKU, etc. I've started to define your games, and you tell me if this is fair or not, as quote single player service titles, end quote. Like that's how I've started interpreting it. Like this is a product, it arrives, and you guys just continue to stick with it. Should this be the expectation moving forward for your games, that they'll continue to get updated for years and years and years?
I don't know that I would put that label on it, but I
Mhm.
think the end thing you said, which is that expectation that we'll update them for years, is true.
Mhm.
We would look back at Skyrim, which we're still updating
Right.
to a small extent, and there's all of the creations and mods there. Still a hugely played game. Same with Fallout 4, that we wish we had supported them longer,
Mm.
right? And we're still doing work there. So going back to that people staying in games, we went into 76 knowing, hey, this is a game we're going to support for as long as we can. Starfield, we go into that knowing the same thing. And as we go into Elder Scrolls 6, we sort of, with all of these games, you got to start now by thinking about like a 10-year horizon,
Mm.
right? How do we support a game for that long? And that's the trick. Like as we sit here right now, our games have never been more popular. We have last month 25 million players in our games. And so
Wow.
the for it's just like a staggering amount of people
Yeah.
and players that we hear from, where our our number one job always is like, how are we serving that audience on a month to month basis, so we're taking care of them while
Mhm.
also developing, new products.
With that in mind, because you mentioned like future games, I know you want to let it have its moment and everything, but is Elder Scrolls 6 like in that bag of, yeah, we got to start thinking long term roadmap for that? You know, what's 10 years of support looking like for that? Because I remember you said with Skyrim, you know, that kind of changed your outlook on how things work, because people just kept coming back to Skyrim, and it's like you continue to support it. So with Elder Scrolls 6 going in with that knowledge, is the plan like a long term support for that too?
100%. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Seeing what Skyrim has done or other games. And I think you could say, look, for Elder Scrolls 6, yeah, I'll just stop there. We know people are going to play it for a long time. And it's not just, I think a game like that, it's not just what it means for content. It, it goes further than that in, the type of game, what it means for your character, what it means for other things, to say, hey, can this be something that you come back to? And so we see that with Skyrim, what people do in the game
Mm.
today. And even though it's popular, what are people doing when they come back to the game after, putting it down for a few years? So
I have more Elder Scrolls questions, but I want to get
Sure.
this straggling Fallout question out of the way, and we'll move on to Elder Scrolls. Um, One thing that a lot of fans have asked about with the Fallout franchise is about Fallout 1 and 2. They could use a little modernization. I know some OG fans may disagree with that, and I respect and understand that. But has there ever been a thought or an idea internally to maybe I look at Wasteland as an example, like Wasteland 1, you can go ahead and play on Xbox. Has there ever been a
Mhm.
thought to port these games, make them a little more beginner friendly? Because the most common thing I hear about Fallout 1 and 2, which is a shame because I was one of those people who was introduced to Fallout with 3. And when I first saw Fallout 1 and 2, I probably had the same thought many did, which is like, that's not Fallout. What is that? Like, is that
Oh,
once I
no.
opened up to it, I was like, oh my God, these are incredible video games. And like more people need to experience these. And I think more people would appreciate, especially things you guys have done with like the Fallout TV show, which clearly pull from the originals in a lot of ways. Have you ever considered like modernizing these in any way? Because I know it's a little bit of a tougher get because this is such an old project, but whether it be on PC or consoles, has there ever been a consideration of modernizing them, making them more beginner friendly? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, look, I love the question and agree with a lot of what you said. A main priority for us is to make sure they're available and you can still play them. So in the
Mhm.
PC, obviously they're there for people to go and get and play, and making sure that they run okay. As far as sort of beyond that, we've talked about it, but our priorities in terms of, hey, let's go do dev work and make certain things work. Um, they haven't been in those areas.
Sure.
So again, priority is, hey, can people load it up and play it? And I do think we want it to load up and run well. The rest of it, like I could argue, I think some of the charm of games, from that area and the original Fallouts is a little bit of that age,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So um, I would never want to sort of paste over some of that with, well, we changed how this works, so it's more modern.
I can
Again, so as
respect
long
that.
as you can download it, as long as it loads up and runs,
Mhm.
I think I'd like people to experience it the way it was.
No, I totally respect that. So, what if you had it as the way it was on consoles? Is that ever like I don't even know if that would be possible with the way the game controls, but have you thought of that?
Anything is possible, but that's going to be a longer dev throw,
Mhm.
and you sort of have to ask yourself: is that where we want to put our time right now, or is it best played the way it was on a PC? And I think right now, if you ask me, I think the best way to play it is on a PC, mouse and
Sure.
keyboard, the way it was.
Sure. I appreciate you being clear on that. With that, those are my Fallout questions. Just want to dovetail a little into Elder Scrolls, and then we'll move to Starfield. Elder Scrolls fans have had to wait a long time for a little love, and now that Starfield's done, we're not done, I should say, but Starfield's out. We're figuring things out with that. We're looking ahead. We're looking at Elder Scrolls 6, and the question always is, why the long wait between Skyrim and Elder Scrolls 6? And you've answered that a multitude of times, so I'm not going to try to bog you down with that question, but it kind of goes to the source of the same Fallout question I had for you about spin-offs. I think well, I don't know if Elder Scrolls could have the similar style, like New Vegas spinoff, if you will, where it feels like a mainline game, but it's done by a different developer. You guys experimented what felt like briefly, like you had Elder Scrolls Online. That's a success. You had Elder Scrolls Legends. I know that got shut down a couple of years later. Um, I feel like the spin-off ideas are like very plentiful. Like I could see an immersive sim style game with like the Dark Brotherhood or something like that would be sick. But have you guys ever spun your wheels on that, or because again, I'm coming from the interpretation of what I see from like my community and various communities online. Some people think like Bethesda's super protective of Elder Scrolls because that's your baby, right? Like Morrowind, your guys' backs were against the wall, and this was like your comeback game, and it really put you guys in a place in the industry where like you just had success after success, and here you are now. So, are you as protective of Elder Scrolls as people online dare to suggest? And is there ever a world where maybe someone else gets their hands on the Elder Scrolls franchise for some sort of additional work beyond Elder Scrolls Online?
Well, first, I would say is we're protective of all the franchises as
Mhm.
you think. Like we want to make sure they're great and we're serving the audience really, really well. And so, I mean, it's kind of the same answer from Fallout, which is
Sure.
there are a lot of things we look at with Elder Scrolls. You mentioned an immersive Dark Brotherhood sim. I'm not suggesting that wouldn't be a bad game, but I don't view that as filling some hole.
Mhm.
I mean, pretty like I think what people want out of Elder Scrolls is a mainline game like Skyrim, like Oblivion.
Sure.
And if I look at the franchise again, Elder Scrolls Online has done so well. I can't say enough great things about the team at ZeniMax Online, really good friends with Matt Fire and what they've done over a decade with that game in a
Yeah.
very difficult market, making an MMO. Now, and I've said this, the gap between, I think I saw this on the Twixter, that it's the 6th anniversary of us releasing the teaser for Elder Scrolls 6. Might be
Oh man.
today.
Really? Okay.
Um, and so that did make me pause and say, "Oh wow, that has been a while." And so appreciate that wait. Like I was talking about college football, like,
Mhm,
and now that we're working on Elder Scrolls 6 and we get to see it here in the studio,
mhm.
um, you do miss it. And so appreciate all of those thoughts and are with the fans on that. And we're working hard on it. And
Yeah.
so, one day we'll have it to everybody.
Yeah, you guys have been working on that for a hot minute now, it seems like. How much were you getting done with it while, like, Starfield was in active development? Is that something you're able to speak on?
We overlap a lot in
Sure.
those. We give our pre-productions where we're in design and concept and talking about something.
Mm,
And, a lot of the Starfield technology is the starting point, um, for Elder Scrolls 6, and then
I see.
obviously we try to do another jump up in technology with looking at, what's coming in the future, how do we do that, and always be moving the ball forward.
Are you able to expand a little bit on, like, what that tech is, or is that just secret for now?
It's secret for now.
Okay, understood. All right, let's move on to Starfield then, because we do have brand new information and DLC on that. I have many questions for that. So, for starters, I want to start off with your guys' big June update here, where it's really to the game's, at least from the player perspective, it seems like the two biggest updates where you guys have launched like big features into the game, and this was when you guys just at the, I want to say, the top of this year. You can correct me if I'm wrong, or it was the end of last year. Said like, hey, every 6 weeks or so we'll have something for you. But these are two pretty sizable updates, kind of going back to back. Is this what the cadence can look like moving forward for Starfield into the Shattered Space expansion and maybe even beyond it?
Well, first, I think the cadence of things, I think it's going to differ depending on the update that we're doing and where our development lands. I think sometimes, look, you'll have some shorter gaps. Sometimes you'll have bigger gaps between bigger updates.
Mhm.
And so these two just, they kind of lined up that way. And we really felt coming into the Xbox showcase, that was a really good moment to sort of launch, the mod tools and the creations,
Yeah.
even though it was, close to the maps and the gameplay options that we just did. But, those lined up really well for us dev wise. But then, look, there'll probably be more of a gap after this. There'll be some bigger gaps next year as we look at, those big beats for kind of year 2 that we're planning. And so we'll make sure, hopefully, that we communicate that well to the audience so they kind of know. But I think that 6-week thing that you're referencing, I, I don't see that holding true, and I don't know that it's that helpful if we have something bigger planned to sort of space that out as long as
Yeah.
we're letting everybody know.
No, it totally makes
Yeah.
sense. Starfield Shattered Space. I thought this trailer looked phenomenal. Like, I already love Starfield, but I thought that the base game kind of, I'm driven by to this mentality by like the score of the game. There was like a curiosity, a wonder, like what's out there. Go figure it out. Shattered Space kind of felt like, well, now you know what's out there, and it's not looking too good. So one thing that people have been wondering about with the time that Starfield was spent in development, and then it got that delay into late last year, is about how long this DLC, this expansion, sorry, has been cooking. How long have you guys been working on this one? Again, this goes back to like, it blows my mind for your team size in today's industry. You said 450, how much you guys get done. I know you have a lot of partners and whatnot, but it's so, I don't think people really understand how crazy it is what you guys are able to pull off. So how long has Shattered Space been in development for?
We started it like actual dev work when we finished Starfield,
Mhm.
so early September,
Okay.
end of August, September last year. But we had, obviously talked about it. Here's what it's going to be. We had announced the name. I
Hmm.
think when we announced the deluxe edition, premium edition of Starfield. But to your point, yeah, we are doing a lot. We kind of have 5 teams within the studio, both with obviously Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6, we talked about, the Fallout 76 work. We have a mobile team,
Hmm.
and then we have a team that handles kind of development partnerships and external development that we do along with other folks that help us out. And so, yeah, to your point, it is a lot, but Shattered Space, again, something we had planned for, and one of the things that I mean, it's great to see everybody react to the trailer and the mood that we're trying to put out there. But one of the things that we always liked about it from the get-go, and I don't think people realize, is that Shattered Space, the bulk of that expansion pack, pretty much, once you get to the city and the planet, it takes place there.
That's going to be one of my
It
questions.
allows us to build a landscape like we would traditionally do and have the city and the quest. And so that story takes place there, and the landscape's kind of, content wise, we're looking at kind of like what we do with Far Harbor on Fallout
Mm,
4. We're like,
speaking my
okay,
language.
this is a scope that works for, our development in doing this kind of annual story expansion type of thing. So, really excited about that. And it lets us, kind of do some things the way we would in previous games and give people not completely that experience because it's still Starfield.
Sure.
But, this new kind of alien world that you're able to explore, and it takes place there.
I love that. And I think people are going to be very thrilled to learn that because, one of the critiques really coming out of Starfield's launch was the exploration. I know you've spoken to how Starfield's going to handle a little differently to Fallout to Elder Scrolls. Like they're all going to feel a little different in how they play and how you get around and whatnot. Would you say that some of that focus, I mean, you said you started dev work in September, so maybe you were aware of it, but would you say that some of that response, some of that criticism that came your way fueled the direction of where you were going with Shatterspace? Space? Was like, let's keep this kind of in one area for the most part.
I would say when we were making Starfield, look, we struggled with, how to make exploration fun on big barren planets.
Mhm.
And we felt good with where we landed, knowing that it's not going to scratch the same itch for a lot of people that you would when you have a more bespoke landscape that you're exploring. So it was for us too. We know we wanted to build something like that and felt that this was the right way to go about it with
Mhm.
something that had its own theme and tone that we could put, on a planet. So I think one of the benefits of Starfield and its scope is it allows something like that within it while feeling natural.
Mhm.
So it wasn't a reaction. It was our own reaction that we had
Got it.
as well. Yeah.
Cool. Now you mentioned annual expansions. So is that like the plan? Like each year, because you mentioned year 2 of Starfield, each year is going to have like a new story expansion. Because I won't spoil it for anyone listening, so don't worry. But Starfield kind of ends in a spot where I think there's a full circle moment, but there's also like I have some questions, and I think Shattered Space with Andreja like is answering some questions. So is the idea to continue to answer those questions in continuous years with expansions, not to lock you guys in too hard. I know things change, but would you say you're aiming to do like an annual story expansion every year?
I would say we want to more or less, yeah. How
Mm,
long that continues, hopefully a very long time, but we're planning for the one after this, so there will be another one. And I don't know that our goal is to answer every question. We sort of look at it and say, "Hey, what's a good angle? What do we want to add to the game
mhm,
as far as an experience or a tone or those
mhm.
kind of things?" If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So beyond the story too, do these expansions add anything gameplay wise? Like I saw you guys are working on a vehicle, which is awesome.
The
I'm so
vehicle is
excited for that.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm so
I
excited for that.
can't, yeah.
But
The
do you guys
vehicle
plan
is
on
awesome.
adding any more gameplay mechanics or changes there? You don't have to specify what if you can't, but
We're looking at all that. That's what I
okay.
can say. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about creations because it's something you did mention a little bit earlier, getting added into the Starfield June update. I want to start from the top, and then we'll get into the actual creations themselves. Because a lot of people, I feel, come at the creation engine, buggy, janky, et cetera, et cetera. And I've always been just a staunch defender of it because I think some people fail to understand that it enables the things that they very much like about Bethesda Game Studios games, which is like the customization, the modability of it, and just the amazing content that comes from the community. Has the feedback ever come in hot enough where you guys have had conversations about switching engines before, because this is something people were like, oh, why don't they make Elder Scrolls 6 on, something like Unreal Engine? And I'm like, I don't think that would make much sense for them with all the tech you guys have invested in and assets you have to use for your next game. But has that ever been a conversation like, wow, people don't like this engine for some reason, should we switch? Or has your faith in it been unshakable?
Well, I would say every game we do, we want to push our technology. I think
Mhm,
for what we do, having a custom engine is absolutely the best way to go, because what we do is so unique in the scale of what we do and the agency we give the players and how systemic so many things in the world are. And we keep pushing it and we keep pushing it. And so I cannot say enough about our tech team here and the technology stack and tools that they've given all of us to build at this scale at speed. You then see what it's done to our modding community, right? In
mhm.
terms of, hey, their ability to use it. And whenever we're making that tech, it's always part of our conversation here in the studio. Like, we love doing this. How do we get it out to other people so they can do it as well? And I think if you look at a lot of, I'll just say, top games out there, a lot of them have custom engines and custom tech stacks
Mhm.
for what they need to do. And so we're really no different there. We're always looking to push it. And I think if you're a game developer, you see a lot of that. And I think it's great that our coders here and everybody, honored with a lot of awards as well over the last year at the GDC Awards nomination for technology, at the BAFTAs,
Nice.
and et cetera. So we're really, really happy with where we got it for Starfield. But then obviously we know, like, hey, we look what else is out there. Where can we push it? Working with our other, graphics partners across the industry. And hey, where are you going? Let's work on stuff together and push it wherever we can.
On that mindset here with creations, I had a chance to dive in and just look at what you guys had there. For starters, I noticed like, oh, there's a tracker quest. I'll get into a separate thing on that in a moment, but um, what I noticed also, by the way, which this is a crazy stat that I don't think many people are talking about, is that the storage amount is up to like 100 gigabytes now for console mods, which I think that's up from, was it 2 or 4 in your guys' last game, which is incredible because I think that just enables so much. So beyond the additional storage you guys have found there, which just lets you completely overhaul the game, what can you say that modders will be able to pull off now with the new creation kit in tow?
Well, our hope is, I mean, look, they can do anything that we've
Mm,
done with the game, and getting that out there and already seeing things populated is great. Going back to the space, we know that was an issue for folks, and we worked, early on to how big can we make this? The issue with changing it on the old games, it actually wipes everybody's mods. So we have to be like, we can't just change it on the old games. Like, we wish we could just go like that and it's bigger. But
mm.
going into Starfield, we're like, well, how big? What's the maximum it could possibly be? Because a lot of these mods and creations get really big. So I just think that whole part, for our games, it's so important to us to have all of that there and really to support our creators as well. And so we had a bunch of them in the studio last month, and getting to meet our creators, it really was an incredible experience for us here. And a lot of them now, they've gone from kind of hobbyist to professional, and seeing
Yeah.
that emotion on their faces when, hey, I've quit my job. I'm doing this full time now. And you see what they're doing. And the stuff I've seen that's coming is just awesome.
Yeah, I love your guys' focus on your modding community because it feels earnest. It's awesome that you had them in the studio, 'cause I'm sure that was like just insanely validating for them to be there and to have that moment. But on that mindset here, I had this question for you for later, but I think it's more relevant now. Is would you guys ever consider a sort of, for lack of a better term, like an indie style studio, or maybe team? Studio might be a strong term.
Hmm.
I look at Obsidian as a pretty good example. Like, obviously they're working on Avowed, they're working on the Outer Worlds too. It's like, okay, these are what I put in quotes big games. But then you had like a small team of, I think it was 13 that made Grounded. They had Josh Sawyer and a smaller Splinter team kind of go off and make Pentiment. I've kind of always liked that idea of just breaking up this big team into small fragments. Now you guys are already broken up doing a lot of different things, so maybe we've already sort of answered this question. But I know you personally, Todd, have said multiple times on record that you like to make the big game, the universe, the world you kind of live in. But what about beyond that? Have you ever considered about smaller teams, indie style studio, indie style projects, kind of trying to, fuel the mid tier project, if you will? Just because I'm noticing more and more that these smaller games, these mid sized games, are kind of carrying, not carrying, I should say, but they're really pushing the industry forward as well. And it'd be really interesting to see you guys get behind that, or is that where, to wrap it up, your creator kind of push is like, let's support the modders who support our games? Like, have you ever considered an indie style team at all?
Well, as we talked about before, we're doing quite a bit. We have a whole bunch of teams in work, and I think two parts to an answer there. One is because our games are so big and they're these worlds, you can almost view them as platforms where doing a piece of DLC or whatever becomes a small team for us
Mm,
that we can make something and get it out. The other thing is, the niche for us in a smaller team standalone project really is mobile, right? We had great success with Fallout Shelter. Then we did Blades and the Elder Scrolls Castles mobile game that's coming out worldwide soon. It's in soft launch a number of places. That lets us do something where it's a separate game. We're kind of being able to get something out there in a different fashion.
okay. Okay. Because I have all these different ideas for like a smaller, let's say, hypothetical Fallout game or something like that. But that wouldn't be, this goes back to what we talked about at the top, right? It's about, not checking that box in that list or hitting that cadence. It's about kind of doing it right when, things just come together. So,
But for example, let's say you had an idea for a smaller Fallout experience. It's better for us to say, okay, how do we do that and get it out in Fallout 76? Right.
okay.
And so if you view these things as kind of platforms for those experiences,
Sure.
we have the ability to do that. We kind of do it now, but just kind of in that way.
No, that's a perfect answer. That totally brings it into frame. Sticking with this kind of community driven content, I just had to ask because when I was in the creation store, I saw, for example, there was a ship module that was $10. I know you don't go in there and personally set the prices yourself. I saw that some additional tracker quests were behind a paywall, and a lot of people seem to be very behind the idea of creations, but they get upset with the pricing structure. I just want to know if you have any comment on that matter, because some people are just upset with how it's being handled. Paid mods again is what they're saying. So are there any thoughts, responses, changes to what's happening with that system? Any pricing changes incoming?
Yeah, we hear that feedback too. And, first of all, I say that stuff gets priced based on, things that we've done before, both in Creation Club and then Fallout 76. And we're always trying to be kind of looking at what else is out there, really make sure we're giving value to everybody. And where we're not, hey, we definitely will adjust. The one thing I want to say on the Trackers Alliance, that was really an attempt to something we did in Creation Club where we'd say, hey, you get this special outfit and you get the special weapon. We kind of wanted to put them together and then thought, let's go the extra mile and wrap those around a quest. But now we definitely see the feedback, right? And it's like not what we want at all in terms of, oh no, this looks like a faction that we're chopping up and then selling for 700 credits at a time. And so I do think we're going to take a look at that and how we deliver content, like that, and whether we're changing pricing or breaking it up or what we should do there. So great feedback from the community. The one thing I'll say, we see the feedback and a lot of people kind of, oh no, they're charging for mods. Like as it comes to, particularly the creators out there, look, our view is that a lot of them have gone from hobbyists to professionals, and it's
Mm,
part of our job to make sure they can do that and that they do get paid and they see the monetary rewards from if they make awesome content. And so we had a great experience with Creation Club with our creators, and then the version we're doing now that first launched in Skyrim, everyone's just responded to really, really well. And I think it's important for us. That part of it gives us a really healthy modding community, right? Where you do have professionals and we've seen their content kind of rise all boats in it, but
mm,
you'll still have, I mean, literally millions of free creations there. And we look across the games that we've done, they've literally done like billions of downloads of mods. And it's super important to us that all of that stays really, really healthy. We think it's a big fabric of who we are as a studio, how we talk about modding, what our community is there,
mhm.
and just make sure that we're active and making sure it's as good as it possibly can be for really everybody involved. Obviously, the players and then the creators.
It's great that you guys have recognized the feedback and you're planning to do something about it. Would you say that maybe going forward you'll just kind of split it up, or I mean, you can't say it's a one size fits all for all these mods. It's about their vision at the end of the day. But would you say moving forward, like, oh, we're not maybe gonna like tie this quest to a faction? Maybe we'll just put this quest kind of standalone. Is there going to be some sort of change in how that process goes moving forward based on what you've seen so far?
Well, again, something like the Trackers Alliance started with, "Hey, we have a cool spacesuit or outfit or weapon. How do we get that out, right? Do we
Hmm.
want to put that up in the store for this amount, or do we want to do a quest? And just what's the best way to deliver that?" Again, we had a lot of experience doing that way in Creation Club, and so, but we hear the feedback. We need to evaluate, both
Okay,
pricing, what we put out for free, how we communicate what's in something, and really hear from the community there.
cool.
And again, I point out we've done that across the other games, Skyrim, Fallout 4,
Yeah,
76 in particular.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Maybe this isn't like a completely connected topic, but it's still something I wanted to get your thoughts on. I feel like with the release of Starfield and the review period, as someone who was a part of it, like I was very much an enjoyer of the game, and I understand some of the criticisms that came its way. But I look at moments maybe less like that period where Starfield's reviews were coming out, and it kind of felt like it was starting to snowball a little bit, and more like Fallout Season 1. You guys put out alongside the team at Kilter Films and Amazon this really great show. And I mean, I'm sorry, as someone who's like a skeptic, I was like, this blew my it was so good. I gotta tell you, dude, it was so good that I literally had imposter syndrome. I was like, this is that friggin' good, man. Like I said to my fiance, I was like, I want to make something that makes someone feel that way one day because that was like incredible. So to me, as a major Fallout fan who had skepticism stepping in, I thought you guys just blew the expectations out of the water. And I felt like what started to come from that, and you can still pick and choose how much you pay attention to it, is like, well, Bethesda hates New Vegas. Like that was the kind of narrative come from that season of the TV show. And I just want to get into the mentality of not just you, but the studio. And if this affects anyone at all, I think it's really good that there's this back and forth between like what we're doing here, me and you know, creator, developer, but also like the fans can give their feedback and they can be heard more than ever now with like social media and stuff, like as they gather. But I've noticed that a lot of the feedback has become less about the game and more personal and sometimes making things up that I don't think are entirely true. And I'm just you've said before, like we really do read it all. And as someone who runs my own channels and tries to read all, I'm like some days it's just the worst. Like some days you don't want to read it all. You want to shut the blinds and just go work on something else and not pay any mind to it. So has any of this been to the team's kind of detriment? And to put it under an umbrella, do you sometimes feel like Bethesda Game Studios, for maybe a lack of better term, has a target painted on their back?
Well, you know, I would say you alluded to it, but you've experienced some of that, right?
Mhm.
In your creating of content and what the people who view it and say and what their comments are. And, look, the stuff that we do, you reach a level of popularity and a hype, and you just have to understand, like, for us, I know a lot of that comes with it.
Mhm.
Okay. And you do grow a pretty thick skin if you really want to do this. You have to grow a thick skin in accepting the criticism.
Mhm.
That's what makes us better. And these franchises and the time that people spend in the games, they're really, really important to them. Um, it's not always pleasant to read. No, it's like you wish people would be nicer, but it does matter a lot to them. And so I usually, and yeah, well, the answer is yes, it does affect people here.
Mhm.
They put their hearts and souls into these projects for years and years, and they care about it, all of us, so much to do the best job that we can. But at the end of the day, the fans and the consumers, they should, if it's not living up to what they want out of it, we expect that criticism. We need to hear it and we need to get better. And we're really, really welcoming of it. We're actually like our harshest critics here in
Mhm.
terms of all of that. And so you do get used to it. You do have to grow a thick skin, and just we love it so much that look, that's part of it. We know it's coming, And look, we dive into Reddit a lot. Well, I'll probably read all of the comments on this video. So hey, everybody, yeah, I'm reading them. Be nice, or don't be nice. If I say something f stupid, call me out on it. It's fine. And I've done that, you know, in enough interviews to know. So, but I'd say the same thing to any creator out there, whether it's what you do, Matty, and making these videos, or people making music, putting on SoundCloud, or doing all these things. When you're a creator, no matter what you do, whether you're a game developer, an artist, or whatever, that's going to be part of your experience. And you just have to make sure for yourself, like, do we love this? Do we feel good about it? If so, then we're going to put it out there, and hopefully it'll find an audience that feels the same way we do.
Awesome. I want to know on that mindset here, just with the general reception to stuff you guys put out there. I always like to ask this question. I guess it's a selfish question, I'll admit, because I've started working on my own game with a small team for the better part of like 2-3 years now. And what I always think about is the launch period. Like I feel confident we'll get there. And I think what we have is it's something I'm really happy with. I think about the general reception. And so I look at moments like Starfield. I know you guys are on like a whole other level than whatever I will end up being, but I look at the general reception to Starfield where there's like a good take here, a hot take there, and it felt like again that review process, it came out strong, really good review scores, and I don't think that goes away, but it felt like the community discourse gradually snowballed and it got increasingly more negative. So I want to know from your angle for you. I'm glad you have thick skin, but was the reception what you envisioned? What is the feel for you going into a launch like that, especially Starfield? It feels like we've been hearing about it for so long. As someone who covers you guys' games, I was covering it since it was like a trademark listing. So, uh, was the launch what you in particular envisioned, or do you just kind of detach yourself from that? It's like we have to be able to adjust. We can't create these expectations.
You mentioned the reviews. We were ecstatic. The majority of our reviews in the 90s in a year, it could be the best year ever
Yeah.
for gaming. I don't know. And then being on all these best of the year kind of lists that the game was on, and it's a new IP, so you never quite know with a new IP how it's going to land. And so I think all of the comments in the game and things like that, it's a big game with a lot of hype. It's a double-edged sword. You're going to have a lot of positives, and you're going to have a lot of people it didn't resonate with, or very specific criticism of the game that, a lot of it, we hear that, and some of it are like, yeah, we thought about that. Let's see what we can do. Let's do that. We're going to keep making it better and better. So again, we do really, really welcome it. And it's part of like who we are as we move forward, not just with Starfield, but hey, how are we approaching loot systems as we go into future games or things like that?
It's funny you bring that up. I do have a question about that because I noted with Starfield how it felt like to me there was some shifts in design philosophies. And again, Starfield's its own thing. So part of me is like, hey, this is its own thing. But also I think there's a shared DNA throughout your games with certain elements. And so I look at like the way you guys handled loot. Like I love the whole unique weapon and armor system, which I know is still in Starfield, but I think like Skyrim was one of those moments I was like, that's where I really recognized I fell in love with it. In fact, that was like kind of some of my first videos I made about your guys' games. Is just like, here's how you get, the Dawnbreaker or whatever. I just loved hunting those down. Whereas I noticed with Fallout 4, it really began, 76, Starfield. You guys have sort of focused on things like legendary weapons. And that's just like one example. I know with Starfield's a little more procedural generation, changes how the exploration feels. And I feel like in some instances, it's just isolated to Starfield. In some other instances, like the loot, it's carrying across multiple games. So would you say maybe that your design philosophies have shifted over the years on like what you guys enjoy putting in the games? The stats say like, hey, they like the legendary weapons more than the unique loot and armor? Or is it an asset intensive lift where it's like, oh, we got to make unique looking assets for all these weapons. We can't do that constantly. So this is an easier way to do it and create a lower lift. Like, what is some of the thought process behind some of the design philosophies, at least that I noticed that changed heading into Starfield?
Great question. We can get really like stat and nerdy here for a minute.
Sure.
Like I think we need both, right? So the one off kind of those story-based items, whether it's weapons or armor. Love to do those, and you can never kind of do enough of them. The other side, which is the legendary system that you see in Starfield, some of that takes the place of like enchanted or magic weapons that you would see in
Mm,
an Elder Scrolls, right? And I think there are a lot of games. We still have a ways to go. We've done a lot of strides in 76 as it comes to loot drops and that grind. Starfield, I think we moved the ball in terms of where we were in Fallout, but I think we have a ways to go. There are a lot of games out there that just all they are loot grinds, and they do it really, really well. And balancing that, is a big trick.
mhm.
And I think everybody here plays a lot of games where you see it done really well, or you see it's okay, and then they update the game and they just tweak loot drops, and the game feels so much different. It's so much more rewarding. And so I think we need both. I like those bespoke weapons that have a story behind them. You're going after a Daedric artifact or those kind of things. But then the idea that, oh, I might get that drop. I'm going to keep
Mhm.
exploring. I'm going to get that legendary drop that has just the right amount of tweaks to the stats that my character is getting better. I'm more effective. And that really makes kind of those in between moments more rewarding than they normally would be.
The exploration is one thing I was very curious about in that, like, I know you guys have always said that the terrain that you build your map upon is procedurally generated. And so I think a lot of people were caught off guard with how much you leaned into procedural tech with Starfield, but I'm like, this is kind of what they've been doing forever, it feels like. Um, but how big of a part in your games moving forward will that kind of be? In that with Starfield, it felt like it went from the terrain to the content, and I'm very curious if that's going to continue to be a thing where you're going to have, because like what I really liked about, I'll say Skyrim as another example once more, is the Thieves Guild quest line eventually evolved into a where you had to like restore its like former glory, and it kind of evolved into this procedural quest line, but there was an endpoint, right? And I think that endpoint was so crucial. Whereas you guys now, with the popularity of your games, I think have to think beyond that. Like, oh, it might be 10 years before we get back to this, so we have to make sure this is endless. So is procedural generation going to continue to play a massive factor moving forward with other games you do, like including Elder Scrolls 6?
I wouldn't say massive. It's always been a tool in our toolbox. For a
Mhm,
game like Starfield, we had to sort of take it all the way
mhm,
and evolving that technology to do planets, to put all that content around. And so, but, I think it has a place where you need to kind of fill out landscape as opposed to doing it all by hand. It can be better to do some of that procedural. So, I think it depends on what we're doing. Starfield obviously takes it all the way. A game like Skyrim has a little bit of it. A game like Fallout 4 has a little bit of it. 76, actually, a lot of that map was built procedurally.
hmm,
It's static when you play it, but the way we built it development wise, there was a lot of procedural generation there because we were actually building Starfield as we were into 76 and using some of those landscape systems that we
interesting.
were starting on. Yeah.
That's fascinating, and it shows how little some of us know. Because I look at 76, I'm like, that map is gorgeous, and I know it's a whole different from like art direction and everything, but just I never would have been able to tell beyond the terrain. So it's very fascinating to learn something like that.
It's
Wrap
procedural in its creation, not how it's delivered to
Right.
a
Okay.
player. Yeah, if that
That
makes
makes
sense. Yeah.
sense. I really have just one more question for you, Todd, and then you've survived the Matty Gauntlet. um,
This has been awesome.
I really appreciate it. It's been awesome for me. Like, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this, man. I just want to talk about the future. I want to talk a little bit about the future. I've asked a lot of future focused questions, clearly, because that's where my head's at. I always like to know what you guys are up to next. Um, but I think about the rotation you guys are in, right? The Elder Scrolls Fallout, now Starfield. Um, do you consider new IPs down the line? I ask this because Starfield was defined by you as a sort of, if not now, then when, right? So I know there's obviously, with how long these games take to make, that you can only draw a line somewhere, and you can't say forever it'll be these three. But do you still consider new IP? Is it like, okay, we got that out of our system, so to speak? Let's take a look at Elder Scrolls. Let's take a look at Fallout, and we're going to kind of get back into a cadence. And with that in mind, this is more of a broad question. With Starfield support, is there a Starfield 2 or is that just a we're going to continue to support this thing? I know it's a
I
bold
mean,
question,
like,
but
man, I would say we have our hands full right now, as we've talked about, and just making sure that we're like really nurturing each of those franchises. We have now 3, big franchises.
yeah,
To have Starfield be there, it's 14 million players, and that's the average playtime is still over 40 hours a player. It's just like a staggering amount of
yeah,
time in game. And so taking care of each of those franchises and all those players we talked about, we have our hands full right now, and just hope to do the best that we can across the studio for all of it. And we understand, like, hey, people are going to have to wait sometimes till we get some of these big things out. And we just hope, we hope it's worth the wait and everybody loves the games as much as we've loved making them.
absolutely. That's all I got for you, man. Again,
This was awesome.
yeah, seriously, thank you so much. Obviously, for me, I know we've chatted before, but just to have the opportunity to do this, I can't thank you and the team of Bethesda enough to let this even happen. It means a lot because I know I have strong opinions, so I know I just sometimes I feel like that walls off opportunities. So just know I will forever appreciate this moment you've given me just to have some time to pick your brain. And so again, thank you so much for your time, Todd. I really do appreciate it.
Nah, ditto. I love this. Like I said, I watch a lot of your videos. I'll click it, Matty, depending on the face you're making and like your Mr.
So
Beast face,
I've heard
whatever.
people are starting to tease me a
Like,
little bit
so
about that.
I'm really curious what this one's gonna be. And so really, hey man, congrats to you. Like, we've all followed your
Thank you.
career here. And when this opportunity came up, I'd be like, yeah, I would love to talk to Matty. And look, I think you've called it fairly on our stuff. And so we listen to that and appreciate it. And congrats, for your channel
Thank
and
you.
everything that you've done as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I'll let you go, Todd. You've given me plenty of your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. To anyone who's watching this, if you've tuned in, you've likely made this whole thing possible. So just thank you. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. So stay sexy, stay active. Love you all. Peace.